I was just 8 years old the night my parents decided I wasn't worth a bed of my own. Our house wasn't poor. We weren't struggling. In fact, my father often bragged about how well we lived. A flat-screen TV in every room. Imported tiles. A fridge that sang when it opened. But still, somehow, they made me sleep with the dog. Not just a dog. His name was Tyson. A massive, drooling, shedding German shepherd who had a habit of licking everything, especially himself, at the worst times. His fur stank like sweat and grass and garbage. But Tyson wasn't the problem. It was them. My parents. My younger sister. The ones who laughed while they did it. It started one weekend evening. I had accidentally broken a plate, cheap glass, nothing special. I apologized immediately. But instead of the usual silent treatment or yelling, my mother smiled strangely. "Oh, you're sorry," she said, her voice sweet like poison. "Let's see how sorry you are tonight." I didn't understand at first. I didn't know they had made a plan. I only found out after dinner. "No bed for you tonight," my father said while licking the last of the chicken stew off his fingers. "Tyson will keep you company." My sister, Simi, nearly choked on her food from laughing. "She's going to sleep in the kennel?" she asked, eyes wide with fake horror and real glee. "No, no, not the kennel," my mom answered with a chuckle. "Let's be humane. Tyson can share her bed. Or better yet, she can share his." Everyone laughed. Loudly. I stood there. Not moving. Not crying. Just frozen. "You heard us," Dad said. "Go lie down." With Tyson. When I entered the room, Tyson was already sprawled out on the thin mattress they laid on the floor for me. The dog barked once, happily. He thought it was a game. I lay down beside him, trembling. The smell, the panting, the heat from his body, it made my stomach turn. Every few minutes, he'd nudge me with his wet nose or place a heavy paw on my chest. And in the living room? More laughter. My sister's high-pitched voice. My mother saying, "Look at her face." My dad roaring, "Teach her to be careful next time." They treated it like entertainment. Like a show. That night, I barely slept. Every time I dozed off, Tyson would shift and jolt me awake with his sudden movement or a lick across my cheek. I wept silently, praying for morning. Hoping someone, anyone, would rescue me. No one did. After that night, something inside me cracked. It wasn't the kind of pain that fades. It was the kind that stays in your bones. The kind that reshapes how you see everything, your family, your home, even yourself. For weeks, I couldn't look at Tyson without flinching. But worse than the smell, worse than the wet nose and heavy paws, was the laughter. The way my parents looked at me like I was some joke. Like I didn't matter. Simi, my younger sister, would bark at me whenever she saw me. Not loudly. Just enough for me to hear and remember. She'd whisper to her friends, "That's my sister. She sleeps with the dog." They'd laugh. Every single time. Sometimes, she'd take one of Tyson's chew toys and toss it at me when no one was looking. "Go fetch," she'd giggle. And my parents? They didn't stop her. In fact, my mother once joined in and said, "Maybe we should feed her in a bowl next." I didn't say anything. I just stared at them. I learned very young that in some homes, silence is safer than truth. But I never forgot. I became quiet. I stopped playing. I stopped laughing. I stopped trusting. Teachers asked if everything was okay at home, and I smiled and nodded. "Yes, Ma. Everything is fine." Because I knew if I said anything, if I told the truth, the punishment waiting for me at home would be worse. So I smiled. I survived. I waited. At night, I lay in bed, thinking of ways to escape. At 10 years old, I started writing in a notebook under my mattress every insult, every moment of humiliation, every betrayal. I called it the Book of Fire. Because I promised myself one thing. I will never forget. I will never forgive. I wrote that line on the first page. Over and over. Until the pen ran dry. It wasn't just the dog incident. That was just the first time they showed me who they really were. There was the time they forgot my birthday, but remembered Simi's in full. She got a party with balloons and cake and friends. I got, oh, we thought it was next week. There was the time they made me wear second-hand clothes from the neighbor's daughter, while Simi got brand new shoes and dresses. They said, she's younger. She deserves better. And there were the times I brought home top marks from school and they barely noticed, yet they celebrated Simi getting 60% like she had won a national prize. At first, I wondered if something was wrong with me. Maybe I wasn't lovable. Maybe I deserved it. But as I grew older, I realized something cold and clear: they chose Simi. They always would. Not because she was smarter. Not because she was better. But because she was easier to control. She laughed at their jokes, even the cruel ones. She followed the rules, even when the rules were unfair. She fit in. I didn't. I was quiet, but I was watching. I was soft-spoken, but I remembered everything. And slowly, I began to change. I stopped crying. I stopped asking for love. I started planning. By the time I turned 15, I had made 3 promises to myself. 1, I would get out of that house. 2, I would become so powerful they'd have no choice but to remember me. 3, I would make them regret every time they laughed at me. Not with violence. Not with yelling. But with success. And silence. Because the best revenge is not screaming, "Look at me now." The best revenge is when they realize, too late, that the one they buried came back as a queen. The first real spark came when I was 16. It was small. Almost invisible. But in my world of silence and shame, it was a revolution. One evening, Simi was laughing with her friends in the living room. Loud and careless. Our parents were in the kitchen, bragging to guests about how gifted Simi was, even though she had just failed 2 classes. I sat in my room, as usual, trying to block it all out. Then something happened. A teacher had given me a recommendation form for a scholarship to a summer technology boot camp in Lagos. It was a big deal. The kind of program where real entrepreneurs and coders spoke. Where investors came looking for young minds. Only 20 students in the whole country would be selected. And I got in. The day the acceptance email came, I sat there staring at the screen, blinking. They picked me. I printed out the email and walked into the living room. For the first time in months, I spoke without hesitation. Mum. Dad. I got accepted into a tech program in Lagos. They're covering everything. Food, transport, accommodation. I'll be gone for 3 weeks. Silence. Then, laughter. My father laughed first. So now you want to run off to Lagos and become what? Bill Gates? My mother shook her head. 3 weeks? With strangers? You think that's safe? Simi added her own poison. What if they just want to kidnap her? Who would kidnap her anyway? More laughter. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I said, I'm going. And I left the room. They didn't stop me. Those 3 weeks changed my life. For the first time, I was seen, not as a burden, not as the girl who sleeps with dogs, but as a thinker. A builder. A creator. I learned how to code websites, design mobile apps, and pitch ideas to real investors. I soaked in every lesson like a dry sponge in water. And when it was time for the final pitch competition, I won first place with an app one built to help rural girls access free learning materials offline. A woman from the judging panel approached me after the award ceremony. "You have something special," she said. "When you're ready, I'll help you." Her name was Mrs. O'Gundiel. A CEO. A woman who had once been overlooked and underestimated too. She gave me her card. And her trust. That night, I cried for the first time in years, not from pain, but from hope. When I returned home, no one asked how it went. No one said welcome back. No one cared. But I didn't need them to. I had seen what was possible. And once you've seen the sky, you can't be satisfied crawling on the ground. That was the beginning of the end, for them. Back in school, I stayed invisible, but only on the outside. Inside, I was building. I started freelancing online. Writing code for small businesses. Designing logos. Creating websites for local vendors who could barely afford to print flyers. I charged little. But I learned a lot. By the time I turned 18, I had saved over 850,000 Nigerian nairas. Quietly. Secretly. While my parents still believed I was just average. And I applied to a university abroad. I didn't tell anyone until the day I got the scholarship letter. I walked into the living room again, holding it in my hand. "I got a scholarship," I said. This time, no one laughed. My mother looked up. "To where?" "Canada. Full tuition. Full housing. I leave in September." My father frowned. "And who gave you permission?" "I don't need it." Simi scoffed. "Good. Maybe now the house will finally be quiet." I smiled. She had no idea. In the months leading up to my departure, my parents grew colder. They didn't celebrate me. Didn't ask about my visa, my flight, my future. But that didn't matter. On the night before I left, I stood in the doorway of the living room and looked at all three of them one last time. "I'm not coming back," I said. My father grunted. My mother pretended to scroll through her phone. Simi laughed. "No one's begging you." I nodded. And I walked away. What they didn't know was that I had already bought the domain name, queenofthefire.com. What they didn't know was that the world outside was waiting for me, and I was ready. They had lit the fire. Now, I was going to burn down every lie they ever told me about who I was. Canada felt like another planet. The air was different, clean, sharp, honest. Nobody knew me here. Nobody saw me as the girl who slept with the dog. I wasn't someone's mistake. I wasn't a joke. I was just me. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. At first, I struggled. I wasn't used to people being kind for no reason. I flinched when professors praised my work. I hesitated when classmates invited me out. My instinct was always to hide, to expect cruelty, to prepare for betrayal. But slowly, my skin softened. My heart opened. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserved good things. I threw myself into my studies, computer science, with a focus on software engineering. But I didn't stop there. Every night after class, I worked. Freelance. Startup collaborations. Open source projects. I joined tech clubs. I entered hackathons. I failed some. I won others. I kept building. I never let myself forget where I came from. Or why I left. And in the quiet moments, late at night, staring at my laptop screen, I still thought about them. My parents. My sister. The room where I slept with Tyson. The laughter. The humiliation. But now, I thought about it with power. Not pain. Every dollar I earned. Every line of code I wrote. Every client I impressed. It was revenge. Not loud, not messy. Beautiful, clean, unstoppable revenge. By the end of my second year, I had already started my first business. It was a mobile app that helped small African businesses create digital storefronts without needing to know anything about tech. Simple, fast, and free to start. I named it Waza, meaning to shine, to floss. It took off faster than I expected. Small vendors in Nigeria, Canada, United States, Kenya, everywhere, started using it. Some of them messaged me saying things like, "I've never sold this much before. You changed my life. My kids are eating better because of this app." I cried the day a woman from Turkey sent me a voice note thanking me for helping her feed her family. Me. The forgotten girl. The one they said would never amount to anything. When I graduated, I didn't go back home. I didn't even tell them. Instead, I flew straight to Nairobi to speak at a Women in Tech conference. I was 22. On that stage, I stood tall. Confident. In control. And after I spoke, a man approached me. Well-dressed, sharp eyes. He handed me his card. "I'm interested in investing," he said. "Let's talk." That night, I closed my first real funding round. Waza officially became a funded company. And I became a CEO. The news spread online quickly. 23-year-old Nigerian woman raises $1 million for startup helping African vendors go digital. It made the local newspapers back home. And that's when the first message came. It was from Simi. "Hi sis, long time. Saw your article. Proud of you. Mom and Dad said hi too. They'd love to talk sometime." I read the message in silence. Then I laughed. Proud? These were the same people who barked at me. Who watched me cry in the dark with a dog beside me. Who made fun of me every chance they got. Now they were proud? I didn't reply. I let them sit in silence. Over the next year, Waza exploded. We expanded into 10 African countries. I hired over 50 people. We opened a small office. I sent money to trusted friends and told them, hire the best team. Pay them well. Don't tell anyone who owns it yet. Because I had a plan. My revenge wasn't going to be fast. It was going to be perfect. I started a quiet investigation. I found out that my father had lost his job 2 years ago. My mother was running a struggling hair salon from our home. Simi had failed out of university and was back home, trying to build a fake influencer career with barely 5,000 followers. They were exactly where they had always been. While I had built an empire. One day, I called a lawyer. "I want to buy a house," I said. "That one in Ikoyi, the corner house on Taiwo Street." Through a shell company. No names. No connections to me. He got it done in 3 weeks. Then I made my next move. The house I bought was just 5 streets away from the one I grew up in. Not because I missed the area. Not because I wanted to be close. But because I wanted them to feel me. Without seeing me. I furnished the house fully, modern interior, marble floors, a garden with white roses and blue lights at night. I hired a manager to maintain it and told him, "Don't mention my name. Ever." Then I launched a local program through Waza, She Builds. It was meant for young women who had been silenced, overlooked, laughed at, just like me. We offered full scholarships for coding, entrepreneurship, and digital literacy. A 6-month paid program. Free food. Free transportation. Free dignity. Hundreds of girls applied. Guess who showed up on the list? Simi. She applied under a fake name, Simone Ada. But her photo, her voice in the video pitch, her handwriting, I knew her like I knew the scar on my own knee. And I accepted her. I didn't reveal myself. Not yet. Let her come. Let her learn. Let her grow. Let her beg. She walked through the doors of my building in a second-hand blazer and thick makeup to cover the stress on her face. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Her eyes didn't sparkle with cruelty anymore. She was tired. Life had touched her. She didn't recognize the company name. She didn't realize who had founded Waza. She didn't know I was watching from the glass-walled office on the top floor every single day. She didn't know that every time she said thank you to the trainers, she was thanking me. She didn't know that the girl she once humiliated was the woman now feeding her. Week by week, she improved. And I let her. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about me, the final piece of healing. 6 months passed. On graduation day, we hosted a big event. I was the keynote speaker. I had told the media I'd be appearing in person this time. The crowd clapped as I stepped onto the stage in a white suit. And there, third row from the front, was Simi. Her mouth dropped open. She blinked. She stared like she had seen a ghost. And I smiled right at her. I gave my speech calmly, powerfully. When I was a child, I was told I wasn't good enough. That I wasn't strong enough. I was humiliated in ways that still burn in my chest today. But instead of letting it break me, I turned it into a map, a guide. I followed the pain. And it led me here. I locked eyes with her. Some people will never understand the damage they do until they see what you build from the rubble they left you in. And when they come back, asking for forgiveness, that's when you'll realize you've already moved on. Tears streamed down Simi's face. She understood. But I wasn't done. After the speech, she approached me backstage. Her hands trembled. "Sis," she whispered. I turned slowly. She swallowed hard. I didn't know. I didn't know it was you. I swear. I didn't respond. She wiped her eyes. I want to say I'm sorry. For everything. For back then. I was young. I didn't understand what we were doing. I didn't know it would hurt you that much. Please. I looked her dead in the eye. You knew, I said quietly. You just didn't care. She broke down. I was wrong. I didn't mean. You did. Silence. Then I said, your acceptance into this program wasn't an accident. I let you in. I funded your meals. Paid for your learning. Gave you a space to grow. Not because I forgave you. But because I refused to become you. She shook her head. Please, can we just start over? I leaned close. No. After that moment backstage with Simi, I walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because the moment she saw what I had become, the moment she realized I had built the very thing she and our parents tried to destroy, my revenge was complete. But I wasn't done building. I wasn't just the girl who survived anymore. I was the woman shaping futures. After the She Builds graduation, the program exploded. More donations came in. Government bodies reached out. International investors wanted to partner. I started receiving invitations to speak at world conferences, from Berlin to Dubai, Nairobi to New York. They wanted to hear from the girl from nothing who created something powerful, not with rage, but with resilience. I was 25 and already being called the silent giant of tech. People asked me, what drives you? And I always smiled. Because how could I explain that my fuel was a childhood mattress covered in dog hair? How could I say that everything I'd built came from a place they wouldn't believe existed? No one would understand that I'd been building since the moment they laughed at me. That my entire life had been a blueprint of revenge, turned into legacy. I bought more properties. I opened tech hubs in 6 African cities. I started offering full housing scholarships for abused girls. And when I had the power to choose who to hire and who to fire, I chose only the kind, the brave, the ones who remembered what it felt like to be forgotten. That was the difference. While my parents and Simi believed in hierarchy and cruelty, I believed in healing and empowerment. But that didn't mean I had forgotten what they did. One day, I asked my lawyer a simple question. Is their house still in their name? He looked it up. No, he said. They lost it. Bank repossessed it last year. They now live in a rented flat in a poor part of town. I paused. Who owns it now? He looked again. A holding company. Managed by a real estate group. I smiled. Buy it. He blinked. Excuse me? I want to own that house. Quietly. Don't tell them. Let them keep living in that rented apartment and pass by their old home like it's just another memory. He nodded. And we bought it. The same house where they forced me to sleep with a dog? Now had my name on it. I never stepped foot inside again. That was enough. A year later, a letter came through my company office. It was hand-delivered. No name. Just an envelope with my initials on it. Inside was a folded note written in shaky handwriting. It read, "We're sorry. You turned into something beautiful, and we were too blind to see it. We're struggling now. Simi's been sick. We have no help. No support. If you can find it in your heart. No signature. No apology for what they did, just a plea, disguised in guilt." I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I threw it in the shredder. You see, I had already given them more than they deserved. I let Simi rebuild her life through my program. I gave her tools, food, hope. That was more grace than they ever gave me. But I wouldn't allow their presence in my life anymore. Forgiveness didn't mean access. Healing didn't mean reunion. Some bridges don't get rebuilt. Some bridges burn on purpose. Years passed. I turned 30. I was now the founder of 3 companies, the owner of multiple properties, the director of 2 non-profit organizations, and the proud mentor of over 3,000 young African girls who had learned to believe in themselves. At the grand opening of our newest tech hub, a journalist asked, "What advice would you give to a young girl out there who feels like no one sees her?" I took a breath and said, "Be the fire they didn't expect. Let their silence fuel your voice. Let their cruelty sharpen your kindness. And when you rise, because you will rise, don't waste your time proving them wrong. Build so big they can't even see where you went." Revenge didn't come in one blow. It came quietly. Like smoke under a locked door. Like the slow drip of water in the dark. Like the sound of footsteps when no one's supposed to be home. They didn't see it at first. They didn't recognize that every poster they passed in their neighborhood, the one for Waza, the one with the bold text "Built by Women, for Women," was mine. They didn't know the local cafe that offered free Wi-Fi to schoolgirls was funded by me. They didn't know the bus they now took every morning, the only one that gave students a free ride to school, was part of my silent outreach. But they felt it. The community changed. They watched it become brighter, richer, louder with opportunity for everyone but them. And that was the point. They had made me small. Now I would make them invisible in a world that was finally seeing me. One rainy afternoon, I returned to Nigeria for a private tech summit. My presence wasn't advertised. I didn't want interviews or cameras. I just wanted to walk through the place I had once crawled in. As my black SUV pulled onto the old street I grew up on, I saw them. Standing outside the same little flat they had moved into after losing everything. My father looked older. Thinner. Beaten down by life. My mother's arms were folded, her eyes scanning the road like she was waiting for something that never came. Simi stood beside them with a scarf around her head, holding a plastic bag of medicine. They looked tired. Tired the way I once was, when no one listened, when no one cared. I told the driver, "Stop here." He hesitated. "Here, Ma?" "Yes." I rolled the window down and waited. Sini's eyes were the first to lift. And then she froze. She saw me. She whispered something to my parents. My mother turned, mouth dropping open. My father straightened up, like he was unsure if he was seeing a ghost or a god. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just looked at them. The way they once looked at me, like I wasn't human. Like I was a thing. Except this time, the silence was theirs. And the power was mine. I leaned toward the window and said one thing. "Now you see me." Then I told the driver to go. That was my revenge. No slaps. No screaming. Just presence. Just success. Just the echo of all the nights I cried, returned to them in one simple, perfect sentence. Later that week, I got a letter at the hotel. Delivered again with no name. But I knew who it was from. It said, "You were always the strong one. We just didn't want to admit it. The house feels empty now, even when we're all in it. You don't have to forgive us. But we'll never stop hoping you will." I folded the letter and placed it in my journal under a new heading. They finally saw. But I didn't reply. Because the story wasn't about them anymore. It was about the girl they tried to silence. And the empire she built from their laughter. Years passed. Waza became more than a tech company. It became a movement. We launched hundreds of micro-businesses. Helped thousands of girls escape poverty, abuse, and silence. We turned villages into innovation hubs. And we taught little girls, just like I once was, that their voice mattered. But something strange happened as I grew older. The anger began to fade. Not because they deserved peace, but because I did. Holding on to what they did to me kept me tied to that room, that mattress, that dog. It kept part of me small, even while the rest of me had grown into a force. So I made a choice. Not to forgive. Not to forget. But to let go. One evening, I sat alone in my office as the sun melted behind the Lagos skyline. On my desk sat an old, dusty notebook. The Book of Fire. I hadn't opened it in years. I flipped through the pages, seeing my child handwriting, all the pain I'd poured into the paper. I will never forget. I will never forgive. But something inside me shifted. I pulled out a pen. And beneath those words, I wrote. But I will live. Fully. Loudly. Softly. Proudly. And free. I closed the book. I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it away. I kept it. Because it was part of the story, but no longer the whole one. A month later, I visited one of our girls at a rural school where we had installed solar-powered internet. She was only 7. Big eyes. Bright smile. Quiet voice. Her name was Aisha. She pulled on my sleeve and whispered, "Is it true? That you used to sleep with a dog?" I blinked. "Who told you that?" "My teacher. She said you were bullied. But you became strong. She said you used your sadness like bricks to build a big, big house of dreams." I knelt down in front of her. And I smiled. "It's true." She thought for a second. "Were you scared?" I nodded. "Yes." "Did you cry?" "Every night." "But you're not crying now," she said. "No," I said gently. "Now I'm building." She reached out and hugged me. Tight. Warm. No pity. Just love. That night, I looked at my reflection in the hotel mirror. I didn't see the girl they laughed at. I didn't see the broken thing they tried to make me believe I was. I saw a woman with scars, yes, but also with steel in her spine and softness in her eyes. I saw a warrior. And I whispered to myself, for the first time in decades, I'm proud of you. I never returned to my parents' house. Not even once. I never sat at their table. Never hugged them again. Because some stories don't end with reunion. Some stories end with rebirth. I didn't go back for them. I moved forward for me. And if they ever tell anyone they raised me, let them lie. Let them pretend. Because I know the truth. They didn't raise me. They tried to break me. But I raised myself. And in the end, I didn't just survive. I conquered. Please like and subscribe for more videos. Also comment where you're watching from.